Rice. I'm a sculptor and I originally from London but now working in Mallorca. I studied at the Royal College of Art and have a background in both fine art and furniture design. When I graduated, I was making pieces that were somewhere between sculpture and design. Although my work has shifted more towards sculpture, every now and then it does have elements of function. The central focus of my work is really on materials. I select a material depending on the underlying concept of the work. Sometimes I will arrive at a material through experimentation, just playing with a certain material, testing its limits. Other times I have a concept or something I want to express in my work, and then I look for a material that will help augment the message I'm trying to deliver. It's always a process of sort of give and take with any material. You can't always impose your will on the material because it always has something to say. But that's the thing that I find most interesting when it's kind of working in collaboration with the material. I began working with coal because of my interest in Pompeii and trying to find a material that would somehow reflect something about the fragility of human life. Carbon is a fundamental building block of all organic life. I discovered this way of working with coal and that I could mix it into a paste and then that could be pasted into silicon molds. And it was able to capture very intricate details. When the coal was taken out of the molds, it had this incredible fragility, like it was just about to fall apart. And for me it was a really poignant moment because all the time I'd had in the back of my head the images of the cast in Pompeii and how their lives were sort of extinguished in a moment. I started working with resin, and then we started to notice that when it was wrongly catalyzed, it would create these fractures within the resin. I wanted to look for another element to introduce into the process that could interact with the resin, and I thought about tar. The two couldn't be much more opposite in appearance. But when they're combined, they produce something sort of quite magical, or almost alchemistic. The beauty of the process is that as the resin cures, as it starts to solidify, it generates a lot of heat. So when the tar is encapsulated inside that, the heat starts to melt the tar. So you have this interesting point where this liquid resin is solidifying and then the solid tar is liquefying at the same time, and they're sort of transitioning, swapping roles in a way. And then as the cracks start to open up within the resin, the liquid tar travels through the cracks. And then what it reveals in the process is this panoply of color. You have all these golds, but then incredibly all these turquoises and blues and jade colors that never would have been seen if it hadn't been encapsulated in the resin. With these resin pieces, the sculpture or the composition is internal. So whatever happens inside, I have a certain element of control in that I can decide how much reaction I want in one place, where I'm going to place the tar, but what I can't control is exactly how they will react. There's always an element of surprise. Lighting is another element which at the outset I hadn't really considered. I was so focused on the synthesis of the tar and the resin. But as I began to work more with it, I realized how important light was, both in terms of being able to let you see what's happening inside the sculptures, but then also bringing out more color and even adding more color. So when I'm working with the resin, the first part is pouring the resin, and then I inject different concentrations of catalysts to trigger results. You can only pour a certain volume at a time because that generates a lot of heat. If you pour too much, then it burns and you have the danger that it will catch fire. But I like to use the heat that's generated from the first resin to trigger reactions in the next layers and so on. But once the resin is cured, I often have to leave it for a week or 2 weeks for it to just stop moving. And then I need to release it from the mold. And when it comes out of the mold, it's a complete mess. I have to spend a long time cleaning it up, a lot of sanding, and then a lot of polishing. Sometimes I need to coat the resin with another harder wearing resin or something to contain it to stop it cracking further. It's a very multi-stage process, and it takes an enormous amount of hours to create any of my sculptures. How I arrived at working with resin and coal at the same time is a sort of a funny story. Then I was invited to create a commission, a piece for Chatsworth House in the UK, and the brief was to create a piece of seating that in some way reflected something about the house or the Devonshire family. I was shown the mineral collection, which was started by the Duchess Georgiana, and then they showed us the coal tunnels. So then I conceived of this work, which would be two blocks, one block being resin to reference the mineral collection, and the other block being coal to reference the coal tunnels. One being transparent and translucent and glowing, the other one almost light absorbing. I thought was a beautiful contrast. And that's really what started me on the path to combining the two materials. A lot of the time, how I envisage a material will behave is completely different to how it does behave. But every now and then, it throws up a surprise. It does something that I never could have imagined. And this is really the magic that I try to capture in my work, and it's kind of the core part of my practice, is this element of chance. Often these things happen accidentally, and trying to work out how it happened and why it happened is the real challenge. And then that can take months or years of investigation, trial and error to get that thing to happen again. I like to be able to move on to new terrains and explore new processes. My work involves a lot of problem solving. I'm always having to think of different ways to support the work or lift it or move it, or how much I can pour at one time, or even how I'm going to cut something. There's always so many challenges to overcome. But for me, that's also part of the thing that I enjoy most about my work. And you come up with a really clever solution. Nobody else knows about it. So the challenges are very demanding, but ultimately very rewarding.